بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا قائد المحجلين وشفيع المذنبين وسيد ولي آدم والفخر محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه وبعد. So I'm actually speechless. I don't know what to say. I'm very honored by your presence here and very kind sentiments and Nurani faces. I can feel it, mashallah, and all of these beautiful efforts that are very obvious to me that are ongoing, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you all continued success and tawfiq and gratitude and ziyada in all that you do, and just very happy to be here with you this afternoon, alhamdulillah. So I actually was just in Istanbul before this trip, and I was teaching a week-long 5-day course on the Hikam. And I had selected 40 of them to try to get through in the 5 days. I only managed about 21. Didn't get through the 40. So here's an opportune time for me to try to look at the rest of the 20. I don't think we're going to do it in the session today, but at least we can look at some of the other ones. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Hikam or the aphorisms of Sidi Ibn Ataillah Secondary, they are a series of approximately 200 plus short sayings that generally deal with the idea of how do we actualize and live the meanings of Tawheed, beholding and witnessing the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as also mentioned, the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked by the angel Gabriel, or Jibreel, "Akhbirni an al-ihsan," tell me about ihsan, tell me about excellence, or spiritual excellence. And the word ihsan comes from the word hasan or husn, which means to be beautiful or to be good. So literally it means to make things beautiful, or to make things good, or to add good things to things. So the ihsan, the muhsin, is the one who does that. And that's one of the names of the believers. You know, we were discussing the other day last night in Ellsbury, that there are layers of let's call them nur and light that can be attached to the believers. And the Quran assigns different names to those layers. So we have the muttaqeen, we have the muhsinin, we have the mu'mineen, we have the muslimin. And each one of them has something specific to them. Allah says about the muhsinin, for example, "Inna rahmatallahi qareebun min al-muhsinin." The mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very close to those who do ihsan, to those who add beauty and goodness to things. Because beauty and goodness to things can only come via the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the opening verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, the kitab, the Quran is described as hudan lil-muttaqeen. Hudan lil-muttaqeen, as guidance for the muttaqeen, those who have taqwa, those who stop at the limits, and those who practice Islam to the stability, because that's who will be guided by the Quran, and so forth. So the Hikam then is looking at actualizing these beautiful layers of light that can apply to the believers. And the process or the path by which one tries to imbibe these layers of light and beauty sometimes is referred to as suluk, or tazkiyat al-nafs, purification of the soul, or suluk, sayr suluk, spiritual wayfaring. And sometimes the kind of the technical name for it that we study in the sciences is tasawwuf. So not Sufism, which is the academic word for the phenomena of what they think is tasawwuf, but tasawwuf, not Sufism, is the study of the sciences of the heart and how one can avail themselves of, to be of the muhsinin and the muttaqeen and the mu'mineen and so forth, and al-rashideen. And so there's a particular science that has developed out of that by ilham, by inspiration, by studying of the nusus of the Quran and the Sunnah, by tried and true practice. Basically the whole gamut of Islamic epistemology has contributed to to this science. And so it has been developed, it has been vetted, it has been peer-reviewed, and one of the seminal works, or the most important works in this science, is the Hikam of Sidi Ibn Ataillah. So it kind of takes you on a path from Hikam number 1 to all the way to Hikam number 200 plus, 236, to the end of what the path looks like, and that there are milestones by which to find them. So on our way here from Aylesbury to this place just outside of Birmingham, I think, there are things along the way and routes, and the A something in the M1 or the M6 or whatever that we took, that gives us kind of the signs of we're getting closer to our destination. And so these sorts of works can contribute to that understanding. Like, how do I know, how can I tell about myself that I am in this category of al-muqarrabeen, for example? That's mentioned in Surah Al-Waqi'ah. There's Ahl al-Yameen, there's al-Abrar, then there's al-Muqarraboon, which is a different category. So there's sort of a spiritual hierarchy to it. And all of it is khair, all of it is good. But at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recognizes there are darajat, there are degrees between levels of good. So Ibn Ataillah then tries to establish kind of ways by which we can look about this and think about it and apply it to ourselves. And they're very beautiful, the hikam. Some of them said, "Kada an yakuna Qur'an." It's almost like it was Qur'an. And that's not blasphemous in any way, and that's not taken away from the Qur'an. It's saying that this particular individual who imbibed the virtues of the Qur'an and Sunnah, and some of the ahadith indicate that someone who stays silent except to speak good and practices Islam to the best ability, what will come out of them will be hikam, will be light. Because now they're not so much speaking of their own ego and their own volition, but following the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who did not speak of his own volition. What he spoke was wahy, was revelation. What the awliya and the asfiya and the atqiya speak of is ilham, or kalam mulham. It's inspired speech, which is not infused with ego and with trying to impress people and trying to get them to praise you, and because that makes an impurity into it. But when it's stripped of all of that, then what comes out is hikam. And the fact that here we are nearly 750 years later, about 750 years later after his death, we're still talking about it, and we're still reading his book, and people are still writing commentaries and studying it, is a testament that this book is not just a book written by an individual, it's a book that was gifted to the ummah, and is a book of the ummah. Right? Because sometimes these works become now the ownership of the ummah itself, not just the individual who wrote them. So like the Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, things that every Muslim knows. The Ihya Retreat of Imam al-Ghazali, so forth. Kitab al-Muwatta al-Imam Malik, Kitab al-Risali Imam al-Shafi'i, Fiqh al-Akbar al-Hanifah. So all of these works then become kutub ummah, right? They're books of the community, and they're not about the individual. Because many, many individuals after them and during their time reviewed it and vetted it and practiced it and taught it. So it is, like Imam al-Shafi'i said about the Muwatta of Imam Malik, he said it's the soundest book you can find after the Quran. So one of the things we look for is soundness in the things that we read and in the sources that we take about how to practice the deen. Because there are sources out there that are less sound than others. There are sources out there that are infused with ego, infused with ideology, infused with trying to convince you or to arrive at a certain conclusion that is at the behest of the author, and not necessarily trying to get you to practice your deen in the best possible way, even though it may be put in the surah, the form of appearing that way. So our ulama, they establish what the sound books are. They established what are the criteria for a sound scholar or teacher to be teaching those books. And they said there has to be a sound learning environment. And there has to be ample time in order to take it all in. So they said the knowledge is not transmitted properly or captured except for 4 things. Kutubun Sihah, sound books. Aql al-Rajah, sound intellect, Shaykh Fattah, a good teacher, Shaykh, and mudawama wa ilhah, and consistency and time to put forth to it. So the path of seeking knowledge and the path of let's say, betterment of the soul is one that has to be done daily. So I'm very much a believer in kind of retreats and getting away and, renewal. But the idea of the retreat is that you just don't do the retreat and go back to what you're doing before. The idea is that you consolidate what you learned and then apply it to your life and your life changes. And then you do it incrementally until the next time you get another opportunity where you do another retreat or have these sorts of gatherings, and then you're adding incrementally. So anyway, so what I want to do is just look at some of these hikam, and I'm on the section that I entitled Giving and Receiving. Giving and Receiving. So we know that amongst the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Mu'ti wal-Mani. Al-Mu'ti wal-Mani. So the Mu'ti is the one who gives. The Mani is the one who deprives. So how do we understand giving and gifting and deprivation in the divine context? If we're looking at it coming completely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do I deal with setback or disappointment or what I deem to be deprivation? And I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will manage. That ultimately He's the one who says, you're not going to have this right now. And ultimately He's the one that says, this is for you right now. So there's kind of a spiritual psychology underpinning all of that. And Ibn Ataillah seconded it very beautifully in some of these hikam. He explains that. So the first one I want to look together with you. قال رحمه الله متى فتح باب الفهم في المنع عاد المنع عين العطاء. In Arabic. متى فتح باب الفهم في المنع عاد المنع عين العطاء. Whenever he opens the door of understanding in deprivation, the deprivation becomes the epitome of bestowing, of giving. So read it again, you gotta think about it a little bit. Whenever he opens the door of understanding in deprivation, then deprivation, that same deprivation, becomes the epitome of bestowing, of giving. So, the lack of our understanding in deprivation is what leads us to become upset and not contented with our situation, with our circumstances. So oftentimes we look to what other people have and how they're doing, and most often at the lowest kind of denominator level, we look at what people possess, what they acquire, what type of house they have, what type of car they drive, what sort of clothes that they wear, these sorts of things, as criteria of success. And sometimes, in extreme form, as criteria of divine contentment. Yani Allah is pleased with you because He's given you these things. And in some other world theologies, like evangelical Christianity, which I'm familiar with in the US, which may have some a little bit here too, they have something called the prosperity gospel. And the prosperity gospel says that the better believer you become, the better religious person you become, then the more prosperous you will be. And so it's not wrong to seek wealth and to acquire things and to have acquisitions of possessions, of material things, because that's an indication that Allah or God is pleased with you, and then you're given this prosperity. We don't have that. We don't have prosperity gospel. It's quite the opposite. We are always the fuqara. Allah al-Ghani. Allah is the one who is not in need of anything and has everything. And we are the fuqara. We are the ones who are always in need. So being in need doesn't mean qillat al-yad. Doesn't mean you have nothing that your hand possesses. But it's the recognition that whatever you have, both from spiritual and divine gifts, as well as material gifts, are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's no way that you could have done it by yourself. And it's not attributed to yourself. So that's part of the part of the hadith Jibreel, ta'abud Allah ka'annaka tarah, of ihsan, worshiping Allah as if you see Him. So you're not seeing even the giving coming from that individual or that person, or the depriving, but you're seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why some of the Sahaba, they would say, ما رأيت شيئا إلا رأيت الله قبله أو بعده أو معه أو فيه. Some of them said, I have not seen anything in this kawn, in this creation, except I saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before it or after it. Because it can't continue to sustain by itself. This house would not stand up if Allah does not want it to stand up. So I see Allah even after this house is gone. Because Allah remains. And everything else is fan. And Allah says about all of this, كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ. Everything upon it is in a state of diminishing. And eventually will be gone. وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. But what remains is the glorious countenance, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, forever. He is the everlasting one. So why should we pin our hopes, our desires, our aspirations, everything that makes us who we are, with something that's fani, something that is always going to be in a state of diminishment and going away? The moment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused it to exist, it has already gone, so to speak. It's already in a state of going towards its eventual destination, which would be fana, which would be extinction. That's just the way this world works. The next world is not a world of extinction. It's the world of forever, of eternalness, of eternity, not this world. And that's why the only thing that Satan could have enticed Adam alayhi salam with was what? Eternity. He had nothing else at his disposal. Right? He said, أَدُلُّكُمْ عَلَى مُلْكٍ لَا يَبْلَى. Let me show you this mulk, this kingdom that will never go away, that's eternal. An eternal kingdom. And ultimately that's what people seek out in this life. يَحْسَبُ أَنَّ مَالَهُ أَخْلَدَ. Believes his wealth gives him eternal life. It doesn't. Even if people remember your name after your death because of the wealth that you had, there will come a day when they forget your name. There's no sort of a sense of eternity to it. It's all temporary. So the believer recognizes this and sees this. And so that which we deem as bestowal or deprivation in this life doesn't have the meaning of this hefty and weighty and eternal bestowal and deprivation. So we see the bumps in the road that happen on this life, not as Allah really depriving us, but He's kind of trying to bring us to Him. Because one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does, when He sees that an individual has strayed, or even a community, He wants what's best for you, He tries to bring you back. So when Allah mentions in the Quran, alhamdulillah, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس يذيقهم ولعلهم بعض الأمر ولعلهم يرجعون. Corruption has come in the land and the sea, so they can taste something. Taste of what? Of what it could be like, so that they may return. وَيُذِيقُنَّهُمْ عَذَابًا أَدْنَى دُونَ عَذَابًا أَكْبَرَ. And they will taste something of adhab al-adna, the lower adhab, which is not really adhab. Because adhab is jaza. So true adhab, punishment, is in recompense for something. That is in the next life. It's not in this life. We should never think any setback that we have in this life, Allah's punishing me. Because this is not an abode of punishment. Allah did call it punishment in the Quran, but He was very specific. He said adhab al-adna, the lower punishment, so not the real punishment. And then you will taste something of it, so that you may come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because ultimately all of this can be a distraction. And if it continues to be a distraction to you, then you will miss the point. You'll lose the plot, as British like to say. You'll miss the whole thing, which is, what am I here for? What is this all about? What am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be thinking about? Where am I supposed to be going? Who am I supposed to be speaking with? What type of company should I keep? And so then you have a more God-conscious, taqwa-driven existence than merely just existing here to enjoy and to satisfy and to fulfill. No, the deen doesn't tell us that we can't have fun and we can't have enjoyment of things. You know, all of this has made for lana, yani it's all for us. This whole thing, everything on the planet is at our disposal, but for our steward-driven use, not for our abuse and misuse and exploitation. That's not what the resources are for. They're there because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us to worship Him, وَاسْتَعْمَرَكُمْ فِيهَا, and also to build it, to cultivate it. Allah subhanahu, all the resources that we need is here. We don't need anything from other planets. They can go explore Mars and Venus and try to establish a colony there. I will never go. I'll tell you that right now, I'm not going. This is where we belong, this planet. And everything that we need is here. But if we abuse it, if we misuse it, if we mistreat it, then we see al-fasad. Then we will see the corruption in both the land and in the sea. And it's interesting that Allah said land and sea, right? Because now we're facing an era of depleted fish populations and species in the sea because of overfishing. And we're seeing, because of global warming and the effect it's having on the ocean's currents, also this fasad. And for the reason is what's in our hearts. بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ, right? That which our hands have reaped, that which we have sown with our own will, and willfully and wrongfully against the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we start to understand, well, what is deprivation really about, except to bring us back to Allah? And then if that's what it's really about, then it's no longer deprivation. As Ibn Ataillah says, عَادَ الْمَنْعُ عَيْنَ الْعَطَاء. Then deprivation becomes bestowal. He's actually giving me something. He's not taking away something from me. He's giving me something so much better. And I'm sure all of us can recall some time in our life where we thought something was being taken away or being deprived of it, and then perhaps years later, weeks later, months later, sometime later on, we reflect upon it and say, you know what, if it didn't turn out like that, X, Y, and Z wouldn't have happened. And then I would not be in the position that I'm in now. So that promotion you didn't get, or the job you didn't get, or the school that you wanted to get into, or the woman or man you wanted to marry didn't work out. At the moment, it didn't look right to you. But later, Allah gives you the wisdom in hindsight, as they say. Hindsight is always 20/20, right? So when you look back at something, oh yeah, that makes sense. But what if we had the hindsight, it becomes foresight. So when we're in the moment, you realize, you know what, I'm going to look back on this years from now and it's going to be fine. So why don't I just try to make myself feel that way right now and spare myself the agony of the pain right now, and I'll just be at the point of hindsight. And that's what's called firasa, right? Firasa al-mu'min yanzur binunillah. The believer who has firasa, who has this foresight, sees by the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not subject to time or place. There is no past, present, and future with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He just is, and will always be. Past, present, and future only apply to things that are temporal, things that have a beginning and an end. Us, Allah has no beginning, He has no end. So none of that applies. So from the divine perspective, hindsight is foresight, and foresight is hindsight. And they're one and the same. Past, present, and future are the moment. They're all the same. There's no difference. And so who you are right now and who you will be, Allah already, subhanahu wa ta'ala, knows that. So the ulama have a beautiful saying. They say, الآتي في المستقبل قطعا كالوجود حالا. That which is known as a certainty that will occur in the future, it's as if it's already here. It's already here if you know for certain it's going to happen in the future. Because things that are certain for us are things we can see. Oh no, it's happening right now, I'm certain about it. Well, what if I know from another source, not my physical observation, but from the wahi, from the revelation, or the Quran, or the hadith, that thing is definitely going to happen. Then I should act like it's certainty, like it's right here in front of me right now. So all the things that we know to be certain, our deaths, our reckoning, the hisab, the walking on the sirat, being brought before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then eventually seeking the shafa'ah, the intercession of our great Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then drinking from the hawd, by his hand, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, such that we will never be thirsty after that. All that is haqq. All that is haqq. And in the tashahhud, in some of these ways, that's what we say in the tashahhud. When the jannati haqq, when the nara haqq, when the sirata haqq. It's all haqq. It's a reminder to ourselves. This is all the ultimate reality and truth. And all of this is kind of a mirage, in a sense, if we give it more value and worth than what it actually deserves. So when you think about it, all of that kind of on the bigger scale, Allah's not really depriving me. He's giving me something, but I don't see it. But when you reach that understanding, you know, that milestone, as we said, if there's fahm fil mana, if there's understanding what deprivation really is, when something is not given to you in the way and manner that you seek it, and you really understand it, then you know it's Allah actually giving something to you. You may not know what that giving is going to look like, what it's going to be. But that's what we call having, you know, certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, this thing didn't work out, but I'm certain that for whatever reason it didn't work out, that's exactly the way that Allah wanted it. So I am accepting of that. That's the meaning of tawakkul and tafweed. وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَصِيرٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. Right? I put tafweed, my whole matter. I am not invested in a particular outcome. Whatever outcome Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides, خلاص فَوْتُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. Why? إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَصِيرٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is well acquainted and sees everything about His ibad, His faithful worshippers. So I'm in good hands. خلاص. What do I have to worry about? Leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's move on to the next one. What time are we supposed to stop? 15 minutes more. Okay. We might get through two. As one of my teachers, my first teachers told me, he said, هذا الأمر كيف وليس كم. It's how you go about doing that, how much. It's not a numbers game. Right? It's better to have even one concept you understand and understand it fully and practice it fully than having all of these things you memorize and then you don't understand much about it. يقول رحمه الله: معصية أورثت ذلا وافتقارا خير من طاعة أورثت عزا واستكبارا. معصية أورثت ذلا وافتقارا خير من طاعة أورثت عزا واستكبارا. A sin that bestows humility and spiritual indigence or impoverishment is better than obedience that bestows haughtiness and arrogance. And this is another concept for the path traveler or the path seeker. How do we deal with our sins? Right? How do we deal with the mistakes that we make? And invariably, when we commit a mistake or make a sin, we feel terrible about it. And that's a sign of belief. That's a sign of iman. And at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may have decreed that for you in a way, and it will lead to an outcome that perhaps you did not anticipate. So the actual deeds themselves are not the goal. They're not the end goal. And this is indicated by many of the hadith. One of them, of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَنْ لَمْ تَنْهَوْ صَلَاةُ عَنَ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ فَمَا ازْدَادَ إِلَّا بُعْدًا. Whoever's prayer does not prevent them from fahsha and munkar, so foul speech and foul acts, then they have not gotten closer to Allah, they've moved further away. But they're still praying. Right? Because he's saying this, but their prayer hasn't served the function that it's supposed to have. وَلَيْسَ كُلُّ مُصَلٍّ مُقِيمٍ. Not everyone who prays is doing iqamah, who's actually doing the prayer in a way that will have that effect. As-salatu munajat, as they say. The salah is an inner conversation between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if it's just like going through the motions, ticking off a box, as it were, then it may not have the effect that it's supposed to have spiritually upon the believer. And sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts little obstacles in your way, and they will have that effect. And it often happens that sometimes believers find themselves on a so-called streak. Like, oh look, I'm doing salah, I'm doing zakat, I contribute to the masjid, And if they don't have a path of suluk, a path journeying towards Allah, wayfaring, then Shaitan has a new set of tools by which to try to trip this person up. So before he was a pious person, he would say, oh no, what is this deen? It's not for you, it's too difficult. What's the big deal? You have a drink here and there, or do this thing and that thing. Allah's very forgiving. Why are you trying yourself out? It's very difficult. Then he gets past this waswasa, this whispering. And then they start to become a pious person. And more pious. Shaitan's like, that old trick is not going to work on this person. Let me try something else. وَيَدْخُلُهُمْ بَابِ الْعُجْبِ, as they said, the door of self-contentment. So he says, oh, you're very pious, you're very good. I'm not sure why Brother Rizwan is managing the retreat. It should be you. Because there's no Rizwan managing the retreat here, right? Just make that up. So it should be you. You're the one who's more pious and people look up to you. And that is when he kind of, he doesn't recite Quran as well as you do. So these things are swirling in your head because you see yourself as a pious person, right? So you're self-witnessing of yourself, right? رؤية الحال, رؤية النفس. They call this الداء الخفي, right? It's kind of a hidden defect. It's hard to spot within yourself. Because naturally you'll say, I do this and I do that, and I do this thing, and you feel good about yourself. And then you take the feeling good about yourself as a good sign, which it may well be. But then Shaitan will find his way, whispering, and will say, no, you should be doing this other thing. You should be the imam. You should be one leading this thing, right? You should be the one holding the microphone. Why is the one holding the microphone? He's not that smart, he's, so forth. So the ta'ah here, awrathat, izzan wastikbal. It made you haughty, it made you arrogant. It's still ta'ah. We're not disputing that. We're not disputing it's an act of obedience. And inshallah, those acts of obedience count in your sahifa, your mizan, your hasanat, certainly. But what is Ibn Ataillah saying? رُبَّ مَعْصِيَةٍ أَوْرَثَتْ ذُلًّا وَافْتِقَارًا خَيْرٌ. Right? Perhaps the ma'asiyah, right, the sin that you see is really horrible, but if it makes you humble, if it makes you humble and feel like everybody's better than you, oh no, I certainly couldn't hold the microphone, I'm not worthy of that. These people they're very pious, I'm nothing like them, I'm doing my best. That's halal faqir. That's the way we should be, even if we're doing all of these pious deeds. Because we're not really doing the pious deeds. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وَفَّقَكَ لِذَلِكَ. He gave you the success to do it. You don't really own those deeds. You are the vessel by which they are being manifested. So Allah is the manifestor, al-Zahir. Right? So the deeds or the manifestations of mercy and of lutuf and of beauty and all these things, Allah does them all. هو المعطي. And the Prophet ﷺ, هو القاسم. He is the one who distributes. So there's no door to the giving of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the bestowal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except via the door of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No question about that. Because if we didn't have Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we wouldn't know any of this. We would not know anything. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose this man, al-Mustafa, al-Mushtaba, Ahmad Muhammad Mahmud sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as to be the Qasim, the distributor of all of this. That's why we follow his example. And his example was one of humility. One time a man came to him and he was shaking. Can you imagine if the Prophet ﷺ was in front of me? I think I'd be shaking. I wouldn't know what to do myself. If I feel that way about the heirs of Muhammad ﷺ, how would it be with the actual Prophet himself ﷺ? He was shaking. The Prophet ﷺ, هَوْنًا عَلَيْكَ. Take it easy. I'm the son of a woman who used to eat the dried meat, which was kind of the, before they had refrigeration, they had, dried meats to store it. And this was seen as something like people who were humble of lesser means, that's what they would eat. They don't always have fresh food, fresh meat, because they don't have the animals, right? They don't possess them. So they had the dried meat. He said, how would I eat? Easy. My mother, she made dried meat for me, that's what I would eat. That was what she'd be eating. That was from the humility. of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would make everyone feel they're the most important person in the room, in their life. Is altafata ma'a. When he turns to somebody, he turns and gives them complete attention. He would ask them about their day and about their affair, and he would engage with them. He would engage with children. He would say to the young brother of Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik, Ya Umayr ma fa'allahu bin Umayr. Ya Umayr, which is, his tasghir, giving him like a little nickname. What did Allah do with the little sparrow that used to play with? وهكذا. When people would come and seek their hajat and seek their needs, even if it was like, a young girl, he would say, I will go with you anywhere for turuq al-Medina and talk to you about what you need. So observing the Shari limits, doing them in public, but anywhere we want to go, we'll talk about what you need. He didn't turn people away. كَانَ أَنْ لَا يَقُولَ لَا. He almost never said no to anybody. Almost never said no. That's not the way of a haughty person or an arrogant person, or a person who sees that they're the sum of their pious deeds. That wasn't the Prophet Muhammad said. So I said this book is about actualizing Tawheed, but actualizing it in a way so that we become more Muhammadan, more like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So back to this hikmah, this ma'asiyah, this misstep, awrathat dhullan wa iftiqaran, right? Humility, and you feel you're in need of Allah, and everyone is better than you. And if you feel that way after a ma'asiyah, then that's a positive outcome. Of course, we return to Allah and we don't want to do it again, but we learned a lesson from it. And we're going to continue to make mistakes. Nobody's infallible, except the Masoom, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everybody else makes mistakes. Whether they're inward mistakes or they're outward mistakes or they're both. We all do that. وَخَيْرُ الْخَطَّائِينَ التَّوَّابُونَ. And the best people who make mistakes are tawwabun. Right? إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ التَّوَّابِينَ وَيُحِبُّ الْمُتَطَهِّرِينَ. This other layers of nur. At-tawwab is not just a person who goes back to Allah once in a while. At-tawwab kathir at-tawbah. All the time. How often? They're always in a state of tawbah. That's how often. Tawbah doesn't leave you. Tawbah is not just a reaction to making a mistake. Tawbah is always trying to be back on the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it's after a mistake or not. Because you always can lose sight. You can always have a lapse. So you always want to get back on. That's a tawwab. وَالْمُتَطَهِّرِينَ. Right? Those who are continuing to purify themselves. And Allah put them together. Tawwab wa mutahharun. What does Allah do about them? He loves them. That means there's a type of nur and light and rahmah that's specific to tawwabin wal mutatahhirin. It's another layer of light that one can avail themselves of. So we should never judge people. We should never say that, oh, they're a sinner, they're this. Even think it in our heart, because they could be better than you. We said past, present, and future are all the same for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe his khitam is way better than yours. You don't know. How many of them were the people who were doing all sorts of things before, and then Allah shone His light on them and they became something completely different? We don't know what our outcome is going to be. One of the Shaykh of our Shaykh, Sayyid Badruddin al-Hassani, who lived in the early 20th century in Damascus, Syria, one time he was walking with a group of his students, and they came upon this kind of drunk, disorderly man, and he approached the Shaykh. And he saw the Shaykh and he just went to kiss his hand, give him salam and so forth. And the Shaykh left him. And he said, Salam alaikum, how are you? How's it going? And so forth. And then they parted ways. The students were like, he's drunk and disgusting. Why are we even engaging with him? Look at his hay'ah, look at the way he looks and so forth. The Shaykh responded to the students. He said, look at the way you're talking about him now. Yet when he came to greet us, what was he thinking? He's thinking, look at these great people, look at these pious people. I just want to kiss their hand, get some of their barakah and their blessing. So he greeted us with husn al-dhan. He greeted us and he had a great opinion of us. How did you greet him? With a horrible opinion of him. He's better than you. Because what you thought you were on was what? He made you arrogant. And his ma'siyah, or the state that he was in, made him humble. And he was just honored and happy to greet all of you. So why would we judge him for that? One of the great Imams, Sidi Ibn Ataillah from the Tabi'een, they asked him a question. They said, what do we do with the drunk people in the street? Should we report them to the police? Make sure that they get there. He's like, why would we do that? He's like, restore them. He's like, conceal them. Bring them into your house. Conceal them. Why would you surrender them to the police? They're in a mistake. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man satara akhi satara Allah yawm al-qiyamah." Whoever conceals their brother in this life, then Allah will conceal them in the next. Why would you put them to the fadiha? Conceal their mistake that's specific to them. We're not talking about, people abusing other people, injustices. We're talking about something, he's drunk in the street. It's not affecting anybody else. Conceal him. Don't let him go through that. Imam al-Junayd, Sayyid al-Ta'ifa, was once also the group of his students. And they found a group of people drinking and laughing and mixing, in a very disorderly and impious way and so forth. And they said, they're like, look at these people. Ya Shaykh, make a dua against them. Make a dua that Allah takes care of these people. Get what they deserve. He's like, okay. He said, Allahumma farrahum fil akhirah kama farrahtahum fil dunya. He said, Allah, make them joyous and happy in the next life, just like you made them joyous and happy in this life. This is the people of mercy. These are Rijalillah. This is the people who studied things and either studied something like the Hikam or they came before the Hikam and inspired people like Ibn Ataillah. This is the deen of Muhammad ﷺ. Not the deen of rigidity and haughtiness and arrogance and ideological divides and talking about people being punished and getting what they deserve and all these sort of. Who are we to decide what people get, what they deserve? I attended a khutbah, I'm not going to say which country, last month. Very disturbing to me. But one of the dua that the Imam made, he said, "Umahlikum kama halakta Ad wa Thamud." Allah destroyed them like you destroyed Ad and Thamud. A'udhu billah. You don't understand the Quran. You don't read the Quran. Because the Quran says, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ يَعْذِبُهُمْ وَأَنْتَ فِيهِمْ وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ مُعَذِّبُهُمْ وَهُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. This is talking to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Allah will not punish them and you are amongst them. Is he not still amongst us? How can you ask for something لا يكون? It will not be. Allah will not give punishment like Ad and Thamud because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is here. You don't respect the Prophet ﷺ. You don't understand. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ مُعَذِّبُهُمْ وَهُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. And Allah will not punish them while they are seeking forgiveness. While they're seeking istighfar, ghufran from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're not here sent as judges, we're here sent as du'at. إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ شَاهِدًا وَمُبَشِّرًا وَنَذِيرًا وَدَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ بِإِذْنِهِ وَسِرَاجًا مُنِيرًا. That's the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. دَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ. He's inviting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by His permission. By His permission. Right? When you invite somebody, when we came in here, it's very beautiful. I guess former manor house, landed gentry, that whole thing. Me and my wife are into that big time. The whole Pride and Prejudice, persuasion, the whole. So kind of like that. And they gave us tea and they gave us these cookies and biscuits. You're inviting us. Right? Did you grab me by the neck and get inside and have a drink of water? Is that how we invite people to Islam? Or we invite them? بِإِذْنِهِ. Right? By the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You think anything by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be rough and violent and, with haughtiness and arrogance and feeling that we're better than everybody else? No, wallahi, if we really saw things the way they are, we would see the ajaib, we would see amazing things. And I see amazing things happening over it, just in the few days that I've been here. Because I see that, that light, that Nur al-Muhammadi of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's inescapable. And if enough people avail themselves of it, then it just spreads. Just like that. Alhamdulillah. So, I think I've gone over my time. So I will stop here, inshallah. I hear this is the beginning of a 40-day retreat, and this is day 3. Is that right? So let's talk after the 40 days. But I'm sure it's going to be great, and many thanks to the organizers and everyone who's involved in participating, and may Allah make it very successful and a life-changing event for you, and to increase you in taqwa and in blessings and iman and love and mercy and compassion, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى والمستمع بسعتك الجميل. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا هب لنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. ويا الله يا الله يا الله بجاه أسماء الله وصفات الله وأنبياء الله ورسل الله والصالحين من عباد الله واقض حوائجنا ظاهرا وباطنا وأرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه وارزقنا حسن الخاتمة نصر الله فتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين. إنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك نسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في الدين والدنيا والآخرة. لك الحمد إذا رضيت ولك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد بعد الرضا ولك الحمد كالذي نقول لك الحمد كالذي تقول ولك الحمد خير مما نقول ولك الحمد على كل حال. اللهم عالم السر منا لا تهتك الستر عنا وعافنا واعف عنا وكنا حيث كنا. ما يقظ قلوبنا لك ونبهنا من غفلة عنك. ما يقظ قلوبنا لك ونبهنا من غفلة عنك. واجعل آخر كلامنا لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. ونصلي وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله وكما يليق بكماله. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.